Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my rating dating advice series. In today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing the advice Compliments Give Your Power Away. So, to summarize the advice, the sentiment is essentially that giving compliments, especially those of a physical nature, will give your power away, which means that the woman is going to be more likely to reject you, or more like this is going to create a bad dynamic. So giving your power away essentially means that she's going to start to see herself as above you, and you're not going to have leverage over her, because proponents of this idea will often say that the leverage you have over a woman is denying her validation and making her question if you actually like her or not. And you're almost exclusively going to hear this advice online, In real life, you're basically never going to hear this. And this doesn't mean that it's bad advice. Actually, a lot of good advice you'll never hear in real life because most people are blue pilled. Most people don't actually know the dynamics that underlie dating. And you're often going to hear this advice from some red pill creators such as, Casey Zander, Michael Sartain, FitX Fearless, or YBC Too Cold. And you're usually going to hear it from guys who heavily prioritize tactics, who may not believe in cold approach, even. So some guys who say this might believe in cold approach, but they might believe in a more indirect form of cold approach, not direct game. And direct game is almost always going to involve some sort of,
This is all of the ways that you consciously validate women. The first is compliments. Compliments actually says to a woman is it goes, hey, I'm not good enough as is, just me as a man existing here. I'm not good enough as is. Let me flatter you. Let me flatter you and let me give you compliments to see if you light up or not.
When guys are like leaving heart eye emojis on a girl's Instagram post and the girl doesn't even know who the guy is, you get my attraction in exchange for nothing. You did no work to get my attraction and now you get it. Versus what Neil
I don't mean to bother you while you're working, but you're very pretty.
Okay, horrible opener there. Really bad. Giving away too much validation for free.
I said I don't mean to.
Bartenders get told this every 5 seconds.
Giving a woman a compliment. Usually, that's pretty much the definition of direct game is that you express, sexual intent or you express like attraction. You say that you find her attractive. You say she's beautiful, gorgeous, pretty, etc. And this advice contradicts with direct game. So what I just mentioned, it contradicts with the direct game approach, which involves showing intent. And showing intent in this context means showing your intention to create this, to make this into a romantic relationship or take a woman on a date or that you find her attractive. So here's some pros of this advice. So this advice is going to discourage you from putting a woman on a pedestal because of her looks. Now this is actually really good. And there is a difference between giving a woman a compliment and putting her on a pedestal. But putting a girl on a pedestal, especially for her looks, is probably the worst mistake you can make and a very, very common mistake. So I'll give this advice that. And another pro is that direct game doesn't work well in social circles because of poisoning of the well. So PW. It makes PW less likely if you follow this advice because, you're not going to come off as creepy most likely if you don't show this kind of intent, if you don't say that you find her attractive. Well, actually, that's not true, but you're less likely to come off as creepy because you could still come off as creepy if you're not showing, clear, direct interest, like giving a girl a compliment or something like that. But it makes it less likely. So it's going to make PW, which stands for poisoning of the well, which means essentially in a social circle or in some other environment, you get seen as a creep, you get labeled as a creep, and like word spreads around, and then it makes it harder to, date women from that group. And here are the cons. So there are a lot of cons to this advice. So direct game, including physical compliments, actually demonstrates confidence. And that's because most guys are too scared to actually let a woman know that that you find her attractive. That's actually most guys. Most guys don't feel comfortable giving a woman a physical compliment when trying to hit on her. You know, the indirect approach is actually more common than the direct approach. You know, that's the approach that most guys will take. Most guys, if they see a girl that they find attractive, they'll try to just start up a so called normal conversation. And also, there needs to be some sort of directness for most guys if you actually want to get laid. So, that's why the likelihood of getting friend zoned increases if you follow this advice, because guys have to show intent most of the time unless they're super attractive. You know, very attractive guys can just rely on women, coming to them and making moves on them and all that. But most guys can't rely on that, and most guys have to be direct to some extent. And you're often going to waste time. It's worse for beginners because beginners need to build up that confidence that comes from, you know, complimenting a woman. And during an approach, if you go up to a woman you see in public, it's going to be hard to transition from an indirect, conversation into more of a man to woman frame is what people say, a conversation that's of a romantic or sexual nature. For beginners, the best advice is that they should just go in and they should just rip off the band-aid and show some intent off the opener, you know, which would involve, giving a compliment, something like that, and then going for the number. These are things that you have to do as a beginner to kind of desensitize yourself. Like you're going to hear like a lot of pretty bad advice, honestly, that you should just like go up to a woman and, make an observation, just say that you like her shoes, if you think that if you say that you think you like a girl's shoes, which is like an opener I've heard from some creators like Face IQ or YBC Too Cold. That's kind of entering gay best friend territory. It's like, oh, I like your shoes. I like your shoes. Oh my god. Oh my god, babe. Oh my god, it's giving. Like it's gonna kind of come off as like a gay best friend a little bit. I mean, like, do you actually care about what a girl's shoes are? Like what her shoes look like? No, you don't. Like you care about like her physical appeal, right? You care about like her face and her body. But and like so like it shows confidence if you're actually willing to be honest about why that's that's why you're there. Because like let's be honest, none of us care about what shoes a woman is wearing. None of us we don't really care where Starbucks is, Like asking a girl where the nearest Starbucks is, where the library is. We're not going to ask that, just to any person, we're just going to ask that to women that we find attractive because we're too much of a pussy to actually say why we're there from the beginning. And, I think that indirect could be more optimal, once you actually get good at game. It's like being direct, you're going to filter out a lot more women than being indirect. But for beginners, most of the time, you're not going to transition from indirect to direct, which you actually have to do, I believe Michael Sartain said, women don't sleep with you because of your intent. They sleep with you because you have compliance or some shit like that. It's like you need intent to sleep with a woman. How the fuck do you think you're going to sleep with a woman if you don't show intent? So Michael Sartain is wrong. Don't listen to him. And yeah, it's also worse for volume, because like an indirect interaction is probably going to take longer because like from the beginning, you're probably going to, start talking about something random, something that's unrelated to, trying to get her number, trying to go on a date, finding her attractive, anything like that. You're probably just going to talk about, I don't know, just some random topic like, like that you like her shoes or like the environment around you. And that's just going to take longer. Whereas, if you open directly, you can get a lot more sets done more quickly. You can shoot more volume. So let's say you go out for like 2 hours or something. Or actually, no, let's say you go out for like 30 minutes. Okay, so you're out 30 minutes trying to approach. You know, you could do one approach where you're indirect that lasts like maybe like 20 minutes. You know, you could spend like 10 minutes kind of walking around looking for a girl to talk to. And then you could spend the next 20 minutes talking to this one girl. And then finally showing intent at the end. And then maybe you get her number, maybe you don't. Or you could approach like 5 different women or something like that. And I think it's more likely that you're going to have success with those 5 women than with that one woman you talk to. You know, we don't have infinite time, you know? So it's better to kind of shoot your shot at more women than to, you know, talk to just one woman and have like a very long, you know, kind of like platonic interaction. Most women won't make the first move. So, you know, most women aren't going to, you know, tell you that they find you attractive. You know, it's going to be up to you to kind of read those signs and make a move, or just make a move without any signs. Just approach because you find her attractive. This is the reality for most guys, you know? If you're Michael Sartain, if you're a celebrity or something like that, then like you don't have to do that. You know, it would be really convenient to just, you know, let a woman, you know, make a move on you. Let a woman, you know, make the first move. But it's not going to happen for most of you. I'm sorry to break it to you. So, ratings advice, I'm going to say it's D tier. It's mostly bad advice. You know, because compliments are going to be essential to most guys' game. You know, especially if you're just starting out. You have to use compliments because they're going to be the number one way that you're going to show intent and actually move an interaction forward. And there's a difference between showing intent versus being supplicating, you know? Or saying, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You know, you're perfect, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm not saying you should do that, but saying, you know, indicating baseline attraction, like saying, like, I think you're pretty. I think you're beautiful. That's fine. That's perfectly fine because why else would you be there? You know, why would you talk to a girl that you didn't think was at least kind of attractive? So, yeah, it's mostly bad advice. It's not the worst advice because, you know, I admitted that there are some good elements to it, but yeah, it's mostly bad advice. And thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you have any suggestions for videos I should make in this series, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.